Lenders across the country are suspending or reviewing foreclosures. Representative Maxine Waters has been calling for a moratorium for some time. She's with us live this morning in a Squawk on the Street exclusive interview. Representative Waters wants to write a law requiring modifications before a bank can foreclose. Good morning, ma'am. Thank you very much for being with us.
Good morning. Certainly.
I just want to make sure I understand your proposal. A bank without, if I understand it correctly, and please correct me if I'm wrong, banks have to offer modifications before they can foreclose. Is that it?
Well, absolutely. What my bill is about, loss mitigation. When a homeowner is in trouble, what the bank would do is to take a look at how they could keep that homeowner in their home. Take a look. If they have less in income, how do you reduce the principal? How do you reduce the interest rates? How do you work out a way by which they can stay in that home through examining all of these possibilities? And that's what eventually gives you a loan modification.
Okay, now in a loan modification, somebody takes a loss. Who do you propose?
Not necessarily.
No?
Not necessarily. There are so many different ways that you can do a loan modification. You can restructure the loan in ways that rather than it being an adjustable rate mortgage, it could be a 30-year mortgage instead of a 15-year or a 10-year, or having the loans continue to reset. There are a lot of ways you can do this, but you have to have loss mitigation procedures in place in order to do it, and that's what they have not been doing.
Yeah, but here it seems to me is the bottom line. You're talking about loss mitigation procedures. People are behind in these mortgages. Somebody's going to lose money. Somebody's not going to get what they bargained for.
Well, as I explained, that's not necessarily so. You can rework these loans in ways that you don't have to lose any money, or you could work some in the way that you're talking about, where you write down the principal or you drop down the interest rate. Don't forget.
But if you write down the principal, the bank's losing money.
Well, don't forget that when you had this bubble in the housing market, they were overvalued anyway. They're underwater now, and they're not worth what they were worth when they first got the mortgage.
Representative Waters, I'm curious about how you get around one crucial issue here. I mean, first of all, extending the sort of the time frame of a mortgage. Some banks have tried that on the loan modifications, and the number of people who still go into foreclosure is still very high. So you still end up with this principal reduction question at the heart of this. I'm curious what you say to Americans who are underwater on their mortgages but are making their payments in full. Because right now, they wouldn't be eligible for a principal reduction. And even under your plan, they wouldn't, because they're current on their mortgage. So there's a real moral hazard at the heart of this. How do you get around it?
Well, the fact of the matter is, you're absolutely correct. There are people who got into mortgages during the housing bubble, and they're making their payments. There were people who were tricked into mortgages that they didn't understand. Adjustable rate mortgages, liar loans, no documentation loans, all of these exotic products that the regulatory agencies did not oversee and allowed on the market. And there are a lot of people who work every day who could afford a 30-year fixed mortgage, but they got into an adjustable rate mortgage that nobody could really afford in the final analysis.
How does your bill, though, distinguish between each of those groups of people so you don't end up bailing out people who knowingly took on more than they could afford?
Well, what you have to do is you have to say to the banks who created this fraudulent system to begin with, you guys have got to straighten this out. The problem has been the federal government came up with a HEMP program, trying to get loan modifications, trying to get refinancing, trying to pay services to do the right thing. The bankers have never come in and said, okay, we created this mess. We really do know how to straighten it out, and we're going to do it. That's why you got to have a pause on all of this, and we've got to review what they're doing with these foreclosures and force them, even if they have to take a loss, to do the right thing. The American public has been tricked and defrauded too long. We've got to make the banks take responsibility.
How long?
I am calling for a national moratorium. We need a pause. We need a pause in all of this to look at the practices and the procedures to see how we can straighten it out.
How long would this moratorium last?
Well, I think that if the bankers are up front, they will get together and decide. Now, I want to tell you, if they don't decide, the attorney generals of all of these states in our country are getting together, and they're going to get tough on this. Their states are hurting, and they want the bankers to step up to the plate and do the right thing. So I hope that they will offer us some answers to all of these questions.
Do you worry at all about the disruption in the housing market that such a moratorium would cause? It would inject an enormous amount of uncertainty.
No, I really don't. I know that there are those who are saying, well, you know, the GSEs, Fannie and Freddie, will accumulate a lot of debt. They won't be able to get rid of their REOs. But they can't cry, have pity on me now, after they have been fraudulent, after they have come out with all these exotic products and tricked people into trying to have the American dream who only wanted to have a home. They've got to come up with a way by which it can be taken care of.
But let me state a premise here, and then you can argue with it if you like.
Yes.
You can't assume fraud in each of these transactions. If someone can prove fraud, they don't need a moratorium. They just need a lawyer to go into court and say, here's the proof that I was defrauded. So,
well, listen, that's very easy to say they just need a lawyer. Do you know that many homeowners can afford their mortgage and their other basic responsibilities? But when you talk about going out and hiring lawyers in order to prove that you have been frauded by these banks, it's an extra burden and responsibility on the average person. The government failed in its oversight and regulatory responsibilities. We're at fault, and we need to help these homeowners.
Well, I certainly understand the extra burden that you're talking about, yes. At the same time, you know, the remedy for fraud is to go into court, prove you've been defrauded, and the court will give you what you want.
No, this is massive collusion and fraud that needs to be dealt with by the attorney generals and or the government.
I don't believe that's been proven by anyone, has it? That there's
yes,
been massive...
it's proven by the fact that you have millions of people who are in foreclosure who never should have been in foreclosure. This just didn't happen because there were a lot of irresponsible people. Think about it. This is unprecedented that this many people all of a sudden would be in foreclosure. What went wrong? I tell you what went wrong. These exotic products that were put on the market tricked them into mortgages they could not afford. They had mortgages that reset, that they never anticipated would reset, where the interest rates would double, where their mortgage payments would double. They never anticipated that. They didn't know what they were getting into. This is not just some irresponsible homeowner. This is massive fraud. That's what it is. It still seems, though, even when you can make that case, and no doubt when you look at the individual level, there are people where that happened, and they're tragic stories. But on a macro level, setting policy for the whole country, I still don't understand how you get around the moral hazard without just simply saying all of the contracts that are out there are not worth the paper they're printed on, without sort of putting the whole legal system we have in question. Well, let me tell you, you better want to see them do something, because guess what? They don't know who these mortgages really belong to, and they're committing more fraud by falsifying documents saying they know who they belong to. These mortgages were sold on the global market with these mortgage-backed securities, and now they don't know who they actually belong to. So when they sell them, you may not really end up owning that home because the title is clouded and you may not really own what you bought. So you better hope that we stop and take a pause and straighten this out, because it will get worse if we don't.
Representative Waters, thank you very much. We appreciate your time.
You're so welcome. Thank you for having me.